All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. To all the people who's going to join in this session later on in March in Santa Fe. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for this Society for Applied Anthropology, for this wonderful opportunity that they give me to present my work in this panel. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Abbosbek. I'm a student from Uzbekistan. Now I'm currently a master's student at Busan National University. So as you might have guessed, this is the part of the thesis, master's thesis work that I have done at the university under the supervision of Richard Shannon. So my today's title is Migration and Development Using Applied Anthropology to Study Socioeconomic Trends in the Migration of Uzbek Students to South Korea. So let's begin with the abstract. This research examines the socioeconomic trends in the migration of Uzbek students to South Korea, focusing on return intention of the students after graduation. This study adopts sequential exploratory design method. Initially, we conduct the qualitative research, then we develop new themes and hypotheses. After we conduct the quantitative research, we compare and find out the significant similarities and differences between the two. Let's look at the research background to understand my motive to start this research. Up until 2016, which was before the new government came to power, studying abroad was not a common thing among Uzbek students. And new government came to power, it started to ease in the travel restriction. In fact, government discarded the OVR system in 2019. It was a kind of an internal visa system, which means anyone who wants to go abroad, they need to get a government permission to do so. So this also shifts the student mobility. For example, in the past, most of the students, they were going to the post-Soviet countries like Russia. Now students are more interested in going into more developed countries like South Korea or Japan. There's also increasing demand for higher education in Uzbekistan, and domestic education market could not keep up with the trend. In fact, only around 31% of the high school graduates were accepted as of 2022. So if we look at the trends in South Korea, we could clearly see this change in this graph. By the way, I myself come to Korea around 2015, and you can see starting from around that time, the number of Uzbek students increased significantly. In terms of foreign population in Korea, Uzbek students were the third on the list as of 2020, just before the pandemic. Seeing this trend, we might think this is a good news for Uzbekistan because those students will be trained here, they develop new knowledge and experience. But true impact of those individuals to the development of the country comes when they return home and bring back those experience. Sometimes this is not always the case. Some people might choose to stay in the host country. If they do so, there will be huge setback for countries like Uzbekistan, which needed their educated talent the most. For this reason, I decided to study this phenomenon by investigating the factors that shapes migration decision of the students to South Korea. Once I identify those factors, I want to know how and what degree do these factors impact their return in migration behavior. If you look at the literature, there were a few works focused on this topic. Some studies highlights the factors including family ties or religious issues can influence the return intention, while others points out the factors such as social integration and economic opportunity as a key factor that pulls migrants to remain in the host country after graduation. Of course, there are many theories to explain this migration phenomenon. However, I adopted one of the leading theory in anthropology as a guiding theory in my research. It divides the factors into two categories. The first, the push factors, are the factors that influence people to leave the country given the economic conditions, political instability, or poor education. And the second category is the pull factors, which are the factors that attracts people to a certain destination. When it comes to choosing methodology, I had three options that I could choose from. The first was the mixed method. First mixed method was the convergent parallel design. In this method, the researcher conduct both qualitative and quantitative research simultaneously and discuss the area of convergence and divergence between the two research. And the second option is explanatory sequential design. Initially, researcher conducts a quantitative research and determines what quantitative results need further explanation. And finally, there is an exploratory sequential design approach. This is the approach that I adopted in this research. Actually, there is a certain logic as why I choose this method. This method can be very effective when it comes to studying topics that are not well covered in the literature. The migration of Uzbek students to South Korea is, as you can see, a relatively recent phenomenon. So there's not much specific research conducted on this topic yet. So I needed to approach this study by exploring the issues that are specific to Uzbek students. So I started off with the qualitative research, conducting in-depth interviews with 10 key informants. After transcribing the interviews, I coded them, did the thematic analysis, and based on the findings, I built my hypothesis and survey questions. Once the survey responses were collected, in the quantitative part, I need to run linear regression to validate my emerging findings. Moving on the thematic analysis, I have these three process. My first step was coding, which means assigning codes to the transcript. And I merged the codes, which I find the common or similarities. And finally, I developed themes. So I came up with these following emerging themes. These are the themes which are less or more related to the topic that I'm researching. For example, student issues, negatives about South Korea, improvement in decision-making. These are the themes which are less relevant to the return intention of the students. While pulling factors, pushing factors, stay intention, obstacles in going back home, for example, might be quite related to the return intention of the students. So based on the careful selection, I came up with these following hypotheses. My hypothesis one, Uzbek students who are highly integrated into South Korean society are more likely to stay in South Korea after graduation. My hypothesis has two sub-hypotheses, one focusing on social integration, the other one focusing on economic integration. And hypothesis two, home country factors have a significant positive influence on the decision of Uzbek students to stay in South Korea after graduation. And finally, hypothesis three, individuals with high religiosity level are less likely to stay in South Korea after graduation. So as for the instruments, I have my dependent variable, which is intention to stay. It measures with 4 components. First component is desire to stay. And second is their choice to stay permanently here or not. And the third, their intention after graduation. And finally, their given time frame for going back home. My independent variable is social integration, measured with their hangout habits, number of contacts, and their social connection, their feeling for the social connection that they feel to the society. My home related factors measured with 4 obstacles that interview participant identify during the qualitative part of the research, which are lack of network, reverse culture shock, and lack of experience when they return home, and low salary offered back home, which might be affecting to their intention to stay in South Korea. And integration is measured with the level of income and employment status. Religiosity index is measured with the level of religiosity and how often do they pray, their praying habits. I have run the model 6 times to see the overall effect of each variable to the model. As you can see in the model 6, social integration and home-related factors turns out to be important and significant factors, while economic integration and religiosity index are not quite related to the intention to stay variable. Finally, we have results. Both qualitative and quantitative results seems to confirm that social integration leads students high intention to stay in the host country. Uzbek students with many Korean friends and spend time with their Korean friends tend to feel strong social connection, and this belonging appears to be encouraging them to prolong their stay in South Korea after graduation. Economic integration, on the other hand, for example, high income or working in a full-time job does not necessarily correlate with the student's decision to remain in South Korea after graduation. However, findings from the interview suggest that vulnerability might be a cause of such high economic integration. As for the home-related factors, such as low salaries, lack of home experience, losing networks over time, and reverse culture shock, these are the obstacles that emerged from the interviews. They all combined have a significant positive influence on the intention of students to remain in South Korea after graduation. As for the religion index, it shows a negative correlation, matching the initial hypothesis. However, model comparison test and p-value suggest that it's not a significant variable. While quantitative results do not align with the proposed hypothesis, insights from the conducted interview suggest that religion might exert a secondary impact on variable that is not explicitly covered in this research. There remains a possibility that religion indirectly influences the intention of students to stay in South Korea by affecting other variables. Finally, we have some interesting findings. A degree and GPA variable both have a negative correlation with the students' intention to stay. I find this quite, I was expecting this quite the opposite. Actually, this is a good news for Uzbekistan, as the students with a high level of education and superior academic performance are less likely to remain in South Korea after graduation. As final part of my presentation, I have prepared some possible discussion question for this panel. So my first question would be, what are the key benefits and challenges do you see when adopting exploratory sequential design methods in this research? And my second question would be, what unique perspective and methodology does applied anthropology bring to the study of migration that might differ from other disciplines? This was actually end of my presentation. Thank you all again for joining in this session. I hope you will have a great time and experience in Santa Fe. Thank you.
Wow.